Okay, in this presentation, we're going to talk about meaning and purpose. Can people live meaningful lives apart from God? And this presentation was done at The Ohio State University for our campus apologetics meetings. This was done back in February 4th of this year. So this is obviously a very important topic because most people do want meaning and purpose in their lives. Now, there's been more than enough books written on this. I barely scratched the surface with these ones here because there's more than these books here out there. You can just scan the internet on Amazon. There's more than enough reading, but these are some of the ones I suggest. The most current one that's come out is the Alistair McGrath one on the top corner here, in a discussion between Richard Dawkins and C.S. Lewis. Of course, he compares both of their worldviews and talks about meaning in life. So some of these other ones are a little older, but they're all good. So if you want to go deeper on this topic, feel free to read these books. There's also some really good articles online. These are some of the best ones I've seen are these two right here, number 1 and number 2. You can look these up online if you want to take note of these links here and go deeper. Some of the material in this presentation is adapted from a couple of these articles, just little parts here and there. So feel free to look up those articles and read them. They're obviously written from a philosophical perspective, but I'm sure you'll get a lot out of them if you take the time to do it. Now, it's interesting that Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, has sold over 34 million copies. It was called The Purpose-Driven Life, What on Earth Am I Here For? Many churches took this book and made it into a study guide and did study groups, and it's obvious that this book struck a nerve. Now, whether it struck a nerve with anyone outside of the Christian community or outside religious circles, I don't know. I don't know how many people, what kind of people read this book, or how many people make up that 34 million that bought it. But the point is that people are interested in this topic, and to sell 34 million copies means that people are thinking about purpose in life. At least some are. So it's just interesting that this book sold so many copies. Now, as I said, I don't know the motives behind the people who bought them. I don't know why they bought them. I don't know, because I can't speak to everybody. But it's just interesting this book did so well, selling 34 million copies. Let's look at some quotes here about meaning. One here is from C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity. He says here, if the whole universe has no meaning, we should have never found out that it has no meaning, just as if there were no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Dark would be without meaning. Interesting quote there for C.S. Lewis. He does that a lot. You can't have one without the other. So he does that with some of his other writings where he talks about it's hard to say there's meaning in the universe if the universe has no meaning. It's interesting that we found out it has meaning, just like he talks about other things such as having a justice out there. If you'd have to know what justice to begin with, and that means you'd have to know what injustice is. You can't have one without the other. It's kind of an interesting quote there. A couple other quotes by other people. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and live well. Another quote here, the mystery of human existence lies not in staying alive, but in finding something to live for. So just a couple quotes, and then we have Russell here, his famous quote. He was an atheist. He says here, the universe may have a purpose, but nothing we know suggests that if so, this purpose has any similarity to ours. So just a few quotes there to get people to think about how people have viewed this topic over the centuries. Of course, there's hundreds of quotes about meaning and purpose. You can look them up, all kinds of authors and people in life. So just a few to get us thinking. Now, we talk about meaning. We have to define what we mean by meaning. And, it's not so simple just to say someone has meaning in life or doesn't have meaning in life. You have to define what you mean, of course. And I think that when it comes to meaning, we tend to cluster around these three basic ideas when we talk about meaning. We're talking about trying to make sense of things, which can include the ideas of intelligibility, clarification, and coherence. We can talk about purpose, of course. For example, like what is the telos, or the goal of something, the end goal of something, or, of course, what we mean by significance. That means that many of us, when we're thinking about meaning and purpose, we're thinking about whether our lives have any significance, which can include the idea of value. And so these are a few things we have to think about when we're talking about meaning. Now, when we talk about meaning as sense making, we need to ask these three questions. For example, if we're trying to make sense of something, we may ask, what did you, or what you said didn't mean a thing, or what did you mean by that statement, or do you know what I mean? Or else meaning is purpose when we ask, what is the meaning of that book? Why was it written? Or I really mean it, or I did mean to do it, I promise. Those are some ways we use meaning in the context of purpose. So something has meaning if it makes sense. It lacks meaning if it does not. So meaning then is often about fitting something in a larger context or whole. So we have questions and concerns surrounding origins, purpose, significance, value, suffering, death, and destiny. We want answers to our questions about these matters and want these answers to fit together in an existentially satisfying way. So we'll talk about that as we go on here. Now, we talk about meaning as something significant. We might say something like, well, that is meaningful. That is a meaningful thing, or that is a meaningless statement, or you mean nothing to me. We say that a lot in certain things when we talk to people in certain contexts. We also, of course, relate purpose and sense making together because, as we say here, number one, we want to know whether we have purpose and if so, what it is. And lives that fit together and make sense, meaningful lives are those that are sufficiently teleological. That means that most of our lives are built on goals, and goals in our lives give us meaning. People that have no goals will generally struggle with meaning and purpose. And we know that the word teleology comes from the telos, which means purpose or goal. For example, when Christian theists talk about teleological arguments, we look at the world of nature and we say certain things in the world of nature and reality look like they have an end goal or purpose. They're going in a direction, such as the human body or the universe or something else out there. The point is their history. So the point is that most of us have teleological goals, and that's very important to us, and that's how we find meaning because we have placed a lot of stock in those teleological goals, whether they be short-term goals or long-term goals. And then it's also important to understand when we get into this debate about meaning, whether people without God in their lives can find meaning, we have to define objective and subjective meaning. And we hopefully know that, if you've ever talked to anybody about this, you know this comes up because there's no doubt that someone that does not believe in God or does not have any biblical worldview can find meaning in life. I would never tell anyone they cannot have a meaningful life if they don't believe in God. But the question becomes, is there any objective meaning to their lives? Or is it strictly subjective? Is it something they've created for themselves? They certainly can create their own meaning, as many people do, and they can come up with all kinds of things that they define as meaningful in their lives. Now, objective refers to something that's mind independent, that's not dependent on us, our internal feelings or our minds. Subjective, of course, is mind dependent. So, as I say, her objective is not based on your opinions, beliefs, or motivations. It would certainly start outside yourself. You derive meaning from an outside source of yourself, or you derive meaning from a source outside yourself that's independent of you, whereas subjective starts with your own opinions and biases. So we need to make sure we're defining those things. These things come up, of course, with morality as well when we talk about objective and subjective morality. Now, we also need to understand there's a difference between meaning of life and the meaning in life. So we often hear one can find meaning in life even if there is no grand cosmic meaning of life. So when we're talking about the meaning of life, we're talking about more about something that is related to an ultimate meaning, more global or cosmic in scope, and it is intertwined with ideas like God and transcendence. So something that comes around, we're talking about meanings of life, or meanings in life. Yes, meanings in life. We're talking about things that are more subjective, focused on personal relationships, created goals, That is not the same thing as the meaning of life. So there's no doubt that people can find meanings in life, but the question is whether there's any ultimate cosmic or transcendent goal or purpose to their lives without God. And I would say no, there's not. And of course, some people don't care. Some people never thought about it. Some people have just simply ignored the question. So that's what we want to make sure we understand. We're talking about meaning in life and the meaning of life, okay? Now, remember, your worldview will answer both of these issues, the meaning of life and meaning in life. And just a quick definition of a worldview. A worldview is an explanation, interpretation of the world, and second, an application of this view. This is a little definition there from a book called Making Sense of Your Worldview, from a Biblical Perspective. So I believe that the key to this whole question is an issue of worldview. There's a guy named Roy Bamister here, and he is a social psychologist, and he identifies themes in this book that have to be engaged and explored before the human quest for meaning can be satisfied. So he says here there are no doubt 4 fundamental questions that must be answered convincingly if a worldview is offering a credible account of the meaning of life. Notice he says meaning of life, not meanings in life. So these 4 questions obviously play a huge role. Identity, who am I? Value, do I matter? Purpose, why am I here? And agency, can I make a difference? These four questions are part of any worldview, and each worldview needs to answer these questions adequately. And I believe these are tied into the whole question about meaning and purpose of life. For example, if you look at this chart right here, we know on this side, the farthest side, that says at the top here, only the material world exists and God does not. That is the column where there's no God in the picture. And that in that column, the view that there's no God tries to answer these 5 questions: a view of reality, origins, humans, morality, and authority. Whereas the chart on the right, or the side on the right side, tries to answer these questions with belief in a theistic God. And however you answer these 5 questions are going to play a huge role in how you view meaning and purpose, especially if there is an ultimate cosmic purpose to life or a transcendent purpose. So this is the whole ball game right here, how you answer these 5 questions. Now, there's no doubt that there have been more than enough debates about each of these questions. There's ongoing debates, more than enough books written. And some people will weigh the evidence for each one, and they will come up with reasons why they think no God is a better explanation. And of course, theists will come up with reasons why we think God is the best explanation for these 5 columns. So this is really the whole ball game right here. It's a worldview issue. For example, if you are an evolutionary naturalist, meaning that you don't believe in God at all, that there is no God in the mix, not theistic evolution, not evolutionary creationism, nothing, then you would have to believe, of course, that God does not exist or is irrelevant, or maybe you don't think there's good evidence for God. I know there's different ways of saying that, but the point is that in evolutionary naturalism, God is not in the picture. Number 2, where do we come from? You come from purposeless evolution, which has cast us alongside other living species, and we're just trying to survive. Of course, where are we going? We're going to dust and death. Eventually, human race will evolve into something else non-human or superhuman, or else it will die out. And then why are we here? We're here to propagate the species. Ultimately, the universe as a whole is purposeless, and human life is in its cosmic setting is purposeless as well. So that's just a general overview of that worldview and the consequences. Now, I know that people that believe that can create meaning in their life. They do things, they want to be productive. I'm not saying they can't live a productive or meaningful life, as I've said before. It's just that there's no ultimate cosmic meaning or purpose or transcendent purpose behind anything, of course. For example, Alex Rosenberg is an atheist. He wrote in the book, The Atheist's Guide to Reality. He says here, is there a God? No. What is the nature of reality? What physics says it is? What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there free will? Not a chance. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. Why should I be moral? Because it makes you feel better than being immoral. Is abortion, euthanasia, suicide, paying taxes, foreign aid, or anything else you don't like forbidden, permissible, or something obligatory? Anything goes. Now, of course, this is ridiculous because Rosenberg is doing philosophy here. He's not doing science. And we know that he's confusing function and meaning because science only deals with how things work, their function. It doesn't deal with ultimate questions, the why questions. So philosophy would have to answer a lot of the things he's bringing up here, but he assumes science can, and that's just not true at all. So as I said before, purpose and sense making are often connected. That means we want to know whether we have purpose, and if so, what it is. And lives that fit together make sense. Meaningful lives are those that are sufficiently teleological. Now, for example, look at William Provine's comment here in a debate he did with Phil Johnson at Stanford University. Both of these men have passed away, sadly, over the last 10 years. But this is what he said in his debate, which you can read the transcript online. He said here, let me summarize my own views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear, and these are basically Darwin's views. There are no gods, no purposes, no goal-directed forces of any kind. There is no life after death. When I die, I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to be dead. That's the end of me. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no free will for humans either. What an unintelligible idea. So, of course, he rejects there is any meaning of life, any transcendent meaning or any kind of ultimate meaning. So you see his worldview is stated very clearly there. Another comment here in the book Chance and Necessity, the author says man is alone in the universe's unfeeling immensity out of which he emerged by chance. Chance alone is at the source of every innovation of all creation, the biosphere. Pure chance, absolutely free but blind, is at the very root of the stupendous edifice of evolution. Another comment here in E.O. Wilson's book, or in the Wilson book, The Meaning of Human Existence. He says here, we were created not by a supernatural intelligence, but by chance and necessity as one species out of millions of species in Earth's biosphere. Hope and wish for otherwise as we will. There is no evidence of an external grace shining down on us. No demonstrable destiny or purpose assigned to us. No second life for us. For the end of the present one, we are, it seems, completely alone. And that, my opinion, is a very good thing. It means we're completely free. So at least he's completely honest about his worldview. So if you hold to a naturalistic evolutionary view, which basically has no teleology, it has no end goal or purpose, you may say that you do have goals in life, or you do have purpose and meaning. You have goals to make the world a better place. Of course, we have to define who gets to define what better is, or you have a goal to help humans attain dignity, respect, and equality and value. But of course, then we have to ask the question, why do humans matter? Or you may say, I have a moral obligation to attain my goals in number 1 and 2 here, but we may respond with why. Why do you have any of these things as goals when your worldview can't really ground any of those things? So the bottom line is that you won't be able to settle the purpose meaning question by leaving other worldview questions out of this discussion. They all go together. So you have to go back and answer those questions. Who am I? What is a human? Why am I here? Why do I have purpose? What is the goal of, or what direction are we headed as a human race? Those big worldview questions come to play here in these issues. Now, there's no doubt that meaning often conveys the idea of significance, mattering, importance, impact, salience, being the object of care and concern and value depending on context. Of course, in a theistic worldview, we want to make the world a better place because we think humans are significant. And our theistic worldview teaches us that all humans have dignity and value. It's not based on their ethnicity. It's not based on their function. It's endowed by them by their creator, and no one can take that away. In an atheistic worldview, you would have to think you make the world a better place because you think humans are significant, even though your non-theistic worldview teaches you are the measure of everything. You would subjectively have to assign value and dignity to humans, as our society does. Of course, if God is not in the mix, we say who has value and dignity, and we assign it to humans, whether it be through a societal issue or individually. Of course, those things can be taken away, and they have been taken away over the decades and centuries. If it was the case for everybody, we would treat people a lot better. So that's something we have to think about when it comes to fighting for a better world and trying to help humans. So, for example, once again, if you get meaning in life from helping other people, we know that many people vote for specific people who pass policies or help specific people or people groups. We know that some people pick a career that will help or benefit other people. Or you don't want people to abuse or mistreat others because you think people have dignity and value, which leads to the question, why do people matter in the first place? Why do you want to spend your time or investing in that issue? And so there's more than enough resources on this that talk about the issue of humans and do we matter, why we matter, and whether human life is sacred. So you can go deeper on that if you read some of these resources right here. But that issue has to be dealt with because I think for many people that do not have God as a starting point, they're certainly going to find meaning and value in helping other people. I hear it all the time. The question is, why do people matter so much, or do they matter, and who says they matter, and what is a human? So that's something that comes up as well that you have to think about. Because in a biblical worldview, there's no doubt that God is a transcendent source, says that all humans are equal, they have dignity and intrinsic value. Value for humans isn't based on usefulness or productivity. That means that it's not based on how much someone can contribute to society. And we are morally obligated to treat people as image bearers of God because we have moral values and moral duties, which is grounded in God's nature itself. And so these things obviously come up in thinking about which worldview grounds those issues. As I said, I'm not saying that someone that does not have God in their life cannot treat people well or be a good person to others or help the world be a better place. The question is which worldview grounds any of those issues and gives grounds to do that. Now, obviously, some people won't care. Some people never thought about it. And some people think it's just silly to even go that deep. But if we're going to live in a world that is based on trying to be rational and trying to think through our beliefs and trying to make good decisions, because being rational is about having true beliefs, then hopefully some people think about this, and hopefully, we hope that this will make a difference. So in contrast to those other worldviews, we have the biblical worldview. And what is the chief end of man? Of course, in the Westminster Confession here, it says man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. That's the main purpose of anyone that is a professing theistic believer, professing biblical believer. That is our chief goal, to glorify God and enjoy him forever. And of course, we deal with the issue of the layout of our historical timeline, that we believe that we are in this middle phase right here in the middle of this chart where it says already not yet, that we believe when Jesus came, he died and rose from the dead, he ushered in the reign or the kingship or the kingdom of God. It has started, but it's not completed yet. It's not finished. And we are in the middle stage right here, right in the middle, the already not yet. It has started, and we're in that tension point where we try to show people what the kingdom is like right now, but of course it's not consummated. That will happen later. So the way history is going is that it's not completed, but we are trying our best in this world to make a difference by helping people find that they are image bearers of God, and their first starting point for value and dignity and meaning is in that relationship with God. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree. We are well aware of that by now, but that's what we're trying to do. And we're not forcing it, we're just basically sharing it. So in a theistic framework, the meaning of life and meaning in life, as I talked about before, the meaning of life and meaning in life requires that a person be appropriately related to God, perhaps as expressed in one's beliefs and especially in one's devotion, worship, and the quality of her life lived with and among others, as, for example, embodied in Jesus' statement of the greatest commandments. So life, of course, for the believer who is a follower of Jesus, we believe life is part of a larger teleological goal. Life is seen as part of a larger teleological goal. And as I said before, when it comes to naturalism, naturalism has three fundamental tenets. The physical world is a sum of reality. That means that's a metaphysical view. All causes are deterministic, and all knowledge comes through science. And here's a little definition by Paul Copon. He says in defining naturalism, the universe's beginning came from nothing, Being came from non-being. The Earth's amazing fine-tuning is a result of unguided physical processes. Biological life emerged against astonishing odds from non-living matter. And that is really a general overview of what a naturalistic worldview would believe as far as why we're here and how we got here. So I bring this up because obviously some people will say that subjective or that naturalism can be a source of meaning and purpose. You don't need to have God in your life. And when we talk about what's called subjective naturalism, that is an optimistic naturalistic view and claiming that life can be robustly meaningful even if there is no God, afterlife, or transcendent realm. And according to subjective naturalism, what constitutes a meaningful life varies from person to person. Subjectively, as a function of one getting what one strongly wants, or by achieving self-established goals, or through accomplishing what one believes to be important. So, of course, as I said before, that's what you would have to do. You'd have to set your own goals. People have their own meanings and own goals, and it's going to be vary from person to person. There is no larger teleological framework as there is in theism. Now, of course, people, when they think about subjective naturalism, these come up, these worries that obviously subjective naturalism will lead to moral relativism. It might allow for bizarre, even immoral activities to ground meaning in life. Of course, people will just go ahead and make up their own meaning, which means there is no transcendent morality or anything, and so obviously that can lead to moral relativism. Meaning and morality on this view are distinct values that can in principle come into conflict. And then there is something called objective naturalism, which is, you may say to yourself, well, how's that possible? But like subjective naturalism, objective naturalism posits that a meaningful life is possible in a purely physical world devoid of finite and infinite spiritual realities. But it does differ, though, in what is required for meaning in life. Objective naturalists claim that a meaningful life is a function of appropriately connecting with mind-independent realities of objective worth, and that these are entirely natural. So they somehow think that they can look at certain things in reality that are not based on their own opinion, that are not subjective, and ground meaning in those things. It's very confusing, but there is a view out there that they can do this. It's obviously debated, but they are calling it objective naturalism. And then, of course, there's pessimistic naturalism or nihilism that says nothing is ultimately of any value and therefore has no meaning. Of course, some people have gone to that extreme, that there is nothing nothing is ultimately of any value. So that can happen and does happen in some cases. There are younger people out there who think this is very trendy and think it's cool to believe this, but it's quite destructive, and if you look at it closer, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And as I said before, as I wrap up, remember, these 5 worldview questions will decide how we ground meanings in life and the meaning of life. I think they're related to each other. So I hope that you're able to think about this and whether you have a larger teleological goal in your life. And so maybe this will get you to go a little deeper and think hard. It will impact your whole life. It's worth looking into it versus just staying busy and being pragmatic. So I hope that this has helped you, and have a good day.